It's great to be here. Some slides should appear left and right, I am hoping. Yes, that would be great. We're good? Okay. I am seeing this from quite a distance. I'll go like this for the next slide. Great. So let's go forward. Tonight's itinerary, we're going to talk very briefly about why transport matters, active transport, public transport, and then ways forward. And where I want to start is with this image. There is a book written about 600 years ago called Journey to the West, and it stars a monk called Tripitaka, and it was filmed as monkey magic. And in the 97th chapter of the 100 chapters of the book, and I read this while doing my PhD at UQ, because PhD students are really busy, the monk Tripitaka opens the Buddhist scriptures that they've brought back from Pakistan in front of the Buddha and reads about a monk named Tripitaka who meets a monkey king and a Pigsy and Sandy, and they go on this journey. And they're all confused. They turn to the Buddha and they say, look, science fiction films are like, 600 years in the future. This is like some mind melt. What's going on? And the Buddha says to them, and this is true, now you understand. It is your journeys that shape you. It is your travels that make you, not your destination. And whether you're watching Little Miss Sunshine or Easy Rider or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, all the great road movies dating back to Homer's Iliad speak this truth. All right. And it's true. Our journeys do make us and shape us, no more so than in the active travel space. And thanks to the Heart Foundation for this lovely slide, the benefits of active and public transport are just luminous. They're just a no-brainer. We need to get more of this, and as our cities are starting to progress in this way, we are becoming, in small ways and in certain parts of Australian cities, better off for it. Okay. I just want to give you some hot-off-the-press results of research that just sums up how myopic we are about transport in cities sometimes, and how we have a particular lens in the way we view things. Honest student of mine, Mohammed Ghafoor, international student, not the best English, as you'll see in the following slides, quite good at graphic design. We surveyed 40 restaurateurs, owners and managers of big restaurants, small restaurants, in three of Brisbane's most important restaurant strips. We asked them, how do people get to your restaurant, and how do those customers, by what mode they come, spend money in your restaurants? I.e., how does money arrive in your till? Here, the next slide, is what restaurateurs told us. The car is king, give us more parking, we want more parking, cars are like unbelievable. There's a big walk-up market, local hotels, people who, international students and yuppies and all sorts of gentrified elderly and others who live in the inner city who are coming in. But here's what the actual proportion of money that arrives came in. So if we go back one, please, thank you. So what we see here, the car shrinks enormously. Walking, cycling and public transport are actually far more fundamental to the business of these restaurateurs, but they have absolutely no idea of this fact. They should be arguing for more walking, cycling and public transport, but they're not. Public transport users actually spend a lot of money in these restaurants because you can drink. Yay, all right, let's move on so that we can do some of that. And if we look at Australian cities, we went through a turning point in the 60s summed up in this slide. We got rid of our streetcars. We decided to redesign our cities around giant freeway plans. We modelled these on giant computers, including at the University of Queensland. And we made many mistakes, and I'm not going to suggest that letting women drive was one of them, because professors who make sexist jokes this week get in lots of trouble, and I don't want to be the guy on Twitter who did that. Next slide. But we redesigned our streets, and we redesigned our neighbourhoods, and we redesigned our homes. We now have the largest homes in the Western world, international standards. Part of that is because there tends to be 2, if not 3, garages in each house. We redesigned our neighbourhoods around the play needs of 5 to 12-year-olds. Not their walk to school, which we wiped out with the cul-de-sac design, not the needs for anyone else to walk through the neighbourhood, and we failed on that battle. It was a terrible design. We moved away from it into the 90s and the 2000s, but we're still left with that legacy out there. And we've built landscapes like this. This is my favourite postcard of Townsville. If you want to see an obesogenic environment, that's it. And this is Brisbane today. The next slide, please. We've just spent $12 billion on 3 road tunnels, the latest of which will open soon, we think. Hopefully it doesn't have a leaky tunnel like the one in Burnley in Melbourne was. But we've been creating a landscape that doesn't work much for walking, for cycling or for public transport. But where we're investing in walking, cycling and public transport, things are going good. Let me just show you some slides from Brisbane. In 1986, I think we start this sequence. This slide shows census data on who travelled into the city by bike. And in 1986, nobody. Basically, nobody is riding a bike to work in Brisbane. In 1988, we built our first ever off-road bike lane, the Bicentennial Bike Path. Yay! Oh, people start riding. The next sequence, the next couple of census periods, we start building more of the network. Oh, we have to invent new colours. People are riding to work more. And when we get to the latest census periods, we have to invent even more colours. We've now got parts of the city where more than, around 12% of people are cycling into work. This was in Brisbane, where nobody was cycling. So we're seeing amazing things where we're building infrastructure. Out in the outer suburbs, where we've done very little, things are not good. Okay, I commend you to look at this strategy and the survey that's come out. I'm only going to mention a couple of things from it, and we might move forward a couple of slides, please. But key things. We're getting more men cycling than women, middle-income earners, and a lot of recreational riders. And what we're not getting, and we just move forward. Just move forward one more, please, because I'm not going at the pace I thought I would be. What we don't have in Australian cities, and Jane picked up on this, we have an awful lot of mammals, middle-aged men in lycra. We have less of what I call effortless cycling, that utilitarian cycling. In the city of Odense, the cycling city of cities in Denmark, the 3rd largest city in Denmark, like Brisbane is the 3rd largest city in Australia, they have a 30% mode share for cycling. The average cycle distance for trips is around 600 metres. Many trips are only 400 metres or less in distance. We don't see that kind of cycling. It's effortless, low distance, easy stuff. And look, for walking it's a bit better. A lot more Australians are walking. We always forget walking, and the support is there. But let's just move forward. One thing I do want to just mention, the survey's very clear and it confirms all the studies we have. We've got very few children getting to school on foot or by bike. We are one of the worst in the known universe at this. We're not as bad as the Americans, but we're close. We've been looking at this in a national study involving University of Melbourne, Curtin University, UNSW, CQU and Griffith. We surveyed kids in 9 schools around the country. Here are some of our findings. We're looking at primary school kids. They are craving independence. They want to get out there, they want to cycle, they want to do it. Their parents, it looks like we've gone through a shift. Australian parents are now more likely to want to give licences, and I use that word, licence, permissions, to their children to do this kind of travel. It looks like we're winning a culture war here, that it's known by parents that driving them to school is maybe not the best thing they should be doing. But there are neighbourhood factors that are preventing this happening. Traffic danger, stranger danger are the 2 big ones parents talk about, but the one that we tease out in interview data is trip distances. And there are things happening in this space. Super schools. We've now got schools outside of Brisbane with 1,500 primary school students. The catchment is 3 kilometres across to get to school, 3 kilometres. Do you think a 10-year-old kid's going to walk 3 kilometres to get to school? I don't think so. We're locking parents into having to drive their child to school. It's an outrage, but anyway, it's cheap for education departments. There is resistance. Can I just commend, and this program probably started around Jane's time at Brisbane City Council, their active school travel program is one of the best in the world, undoubted. I go to international conferences, I see terrible, terrible programs around the world. We do these things great. Federal government money has paid for the healthy active school travel programs. These things work. Let me show a next slide to show how much they work. This chart is amazing. Up until 2007, we were losing the war. More and more kids being driven to school. It's quite a recent phenomenon. In the 80s, it was much better. In the 90s, it was getting bad. By the 2000s, it was getting awful. We managed not just to stem the tide, but turn it around in a 2-year period, because 3 local councils, and in particular Brisbane, started these school-based travel programs, working with neighbourhoods and saying, how can we do it different? Why is this important? 30% of peak hour travel in the morning is school-related. And we all know how easy it is to drive during school travel conditions, right? We want that all the time. We could have that all the time if we, like the city of Odense that I talked about before, had 95% of children coming on foot or by bicycle. Next slide. Okay. Some good things too are also happening in public transport. Let's move forward. On the Gold Coast, next time you're on the Gold Coast, see the miracle that has occurred with federal funding, state government funding and local government funding. Above its patronage forecasts, doesn't even connect to the heavy rail. Brilliant. Okay. One of the secrets to the light rail success is it's not like the Melbourne Trams and stuck in mixed traffic. Where we give buses priority, the same magic happens as well. We build freeways for buses in Brisbane. They're outrageously successful. We're running so many buses down one link, we almost can't fit more buses on the facility now. We're at theoretical capacity. And it's been fabulously successful. But it's not just about infrastructure with buses. What we're starting to see worldwide is using the same bus numbers, but use them in better ways. And you've probably seen this in suburbs around you, high-frequency buses on more direct routes that run more express and that run better. And we're seeing all over Australia that where we put in routes like this, Brisbane's buzz routes, the smart bus in Melbourne, you name it, boom, patronage goes up. But a really important story is what's just happened on the Gold Coast. Yes, we put in a light rail, we readjusted the buses everywhere else. Less bus kilometres, saved ourselves money, and we've had a 20% patronage jump on the Gold Coast, of which the light rail is only responsible for about 5 or 6. The rest came just from using our resources smarter, because a couple of transport planners worked on it. Okay, public transport can also build cities, and it can build property values, and it can save the world. This is Brisbane's City Cats. We've been doing research on what the City Cats have done for property values. It was meant to help renew the centre of Brisbane. It's been wildly successful at that. We've had approximately $4 to $5 billion of investment along the corridor. And we looked at what the property uptake was, and the green dots here are where things went spectacularly well. We've got a few bits of red we can't quite explain in the model, but if I move forward, the headline result was a 4% increase in property values as you came, each kilometre you came closer to the stop. We know this of public transport. But we've got some real problems. Some of our major infrastructure, and I'm talking the big, particularly eastern seaboard rail infrastructure, busway networks in Brisbane and elsewhere, are now at theoretical capacity. We have to invest in some major links, or we won't be able to increase frequencies. Brisbane, we can probably add 2 more slots in peak hour across the river bridges. And that's it. For a long time. So if we want to turn what's basically an early 20th century rail system into a 21st century people-moving system, we're going to have to invest. And that's beyond state and local government possibility, I'm afraid. That will mean federal funding. Okay, the car is changing too. You might have noticed this. It's becoming more electrified. Big issues for fuel excise. It's becoming more autonomous. Cars will soon drive. There are millions of Australians employed as drivers. Major issues for employment coming up. 60% of the costs of a cab are driver-related. It's becoming more collectivised. The car share systems are like a flickering flame. They haven't become a bushfire, but they're there. What happens when drivers aren't needed? That we're not sure. But the big thing, and this is something you probably don't know, is that we hit peak car. Per kilometre travelled, Australians are driving less and less each year. It happened sometime in the first decade of this century, around 2005 sometime. We're not really sure when. But only population growth is keeping car growth going. We would be seeing dramatic reductions if it wasn't for that. There's lots of reason why: e-retailing, telecommuting, young people getting their driver's licence later, all sorts of things. But if we're going to go forward, here are some things we need to do. If you want advice, I recommend this great document, also from the Heart Foundation, Blueprint for an Active Australia. There's a fantastic chapter on transport that I might have been the lead author for. Lots of great ideas on what can be done. Some are really cheap and easy, some are a bit more expensive. But look, there's a fair consensus out there as what needs to be done. Probably starts with this. A national urban policy would be good. If we're going to have better cities, that would be a good starting point. There are nations like China, South Korea and Singapore investing in these policies and investing in research centres on that. Not that I work for such a research centre. Singapore's just invested in a centre for livable cities because they want to rise up the livability rankings in the Economist rankings and the Mercer's Index. It's a productivity and employment agenda. It's not necessarily about greenness and livability. We're investing in beyond Lombok. Next. People in my game are laughing incredulously at the conniptions happening in this House over trying to tie fuel excise to inflation when the whole darn kit and caboodle is going to disappear in a very short space of time. There is a much bigger game that needs to be fought. We in this room need to be part of this, and I'm talking now to anyone who might be part of what I call, well, what policymakers call instrument constituencies. We have to move away from fuel excise to a new set of instruments for how we're going to pay for transport. It's probably going to be a diverse set of instruments, but we need to be at the table. A paper of mine with Anthony Pearl, policy expert from Simon Fraser University, will be published very soon on this. Next slide. Some of the ways forward. Distance-based pricing. Denmark almost went that way, almost got rid of fuel charges and all that sort of stuff. But user pricing is coming in some form, probably. It's happening now for car parking, dynamic parking prices. Look at the San Francisco parking app, unbelievable stuff happening over there, now starting to have effects. Congestion pricing is probably too difficult in the Australian settlement at the moment, but the one at the bottom. Property values go up around public transport. The Americans capture this in something called tax increment financing. We need a tax increment financing mechanism for Australia. And we have wide support for this. The Property Council of Australia is all for it. Infrastructure for Australia is all for it. The public transport agencies, I'm telling you, are all for it. Treasury agencies are a bit worried. There's a long history of rent seeking in the property sector in Australia. I understand their concerns. Let's get them in the table, let's work out better instruments and get this moving forward. Then maybe what we could do with that money is actually fund public transport in a major way. Have a look at the success of the Gold Coast. People on the Gold Coast now are clamouring for more of this. When is it going south? When it is connecting to the heavy rail? When will it get to the airport? Build it now. The whole story of it's going to be a disaster and it's a joke and gone. We want it now. Next. Okay. We need a national physical activity action plan of some description. We now have a health minister who has a first-class honours degree in economics. I know because my father taught her. And look, I'm hopeful that we're going to get something this year in this space. It would be a wonderful achievement if we can get to that. The health economics on preventative health are an absolute no-brainer. And everyone will tell you investing in physical activity, it's just got to happen. All right, next slide. Yep, okay. And there's some really simple, cheap things we could do to help bring ourselves away from being international laughingstocks. We now have some of the highest posted street speeds in the world for small local streets. Most of Europe is now moving to 30 kilometres per hour. Most of Germany, oh, here we go, someone, yes, okay, everyone's rushing, no, good. Most of Germany, Denmark, the Netherlands, etc., all at very, very low street speeds in small local streets. We're at 50. We're thinking we're giving children a favour at 40. If you hit a child at 40, you tend to kill them. At 30, you tend not to. It's a pretty good measure for me that we should be going lower. Most of the wealthy Asian cities are doing the same. South American cities are doing the same. We are now out of lockstep. So it's something we could do. And I'm not talking Northbourne Avenue, I'm talking very small local streets. Okay, so I'd just like to finish here and say, just remember the great sage, the Monkey King, as he becomes at the end of Journey to the West. Next time you see the mini-series or whatever, think of this. Your journeys shape you and make you. There are people in this room who will shape the future journeys of Australians. I hope you make great choices. Thank you very much.